What's up, baby? Episode 117, Wake and Rake podcast, all part of the Believe Network. This episode is brought to you and presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet online where the game starts. Really fun episode for you today. Everybody kind of wonders, everybody's looking toward the future, right? Like, grass is always greener. Nobody likes living in the present moment. We don't appreciate our current active stars nearly enough. Look at what Ohtani is doing in LA right now. It's ridiculous. Everybody wondered, what would Ohtani be like if he stopped pitching and just focused on hitting? He is leading the league in exit velocity, expected batting average, expected slugging. I'm getting off topic here, but it's very normal for us to not appreciate what we have today. So I'm going to tie it all into an episode. What's next? That's what today's episode is going to be focused on. Who is next? Which organization is most suited to follow in the footsteps of what the Baltimore Orioles have become? And this episode comes as kind of a follow-up to our last episode. So if you haven't already seen episode 116 about how the Baltimore Orioles were able to overcome challenges and completely turn a corner on their franchise and resurrect their franchise from being one of, if not the worst franchises in Major League Baseball just a few seasons ago, to now having a championship window of somewhat 5+ years, depending on how everything goes contract-wise. If you haven't seen episode 116, how the Baltimore Orioles did it, please do. Just, if you're on Spotify, if you're on Apple Podcasts, should be just the episode right below 116. If you're on YouTube, should be right next to our video here. So it should set up well for this episode 117. Which team is most suited to follow in their footsteps? The Baltimore Orioles, as we pointed out in 116, essentially followed the blueprint that the Houston Astros laid out for them back in the early 2010s. We all know what happened with the Astros and their American League dynasty. Now, Baltimore Orioles turned the corner. Now they have the best record in the American League in 2023. Now they have one of the best records in Major League Baseball here in 2024, and they don't look like they're going to be stopping anytime soon. So which team is it? Which team has the farm system? Which team has the big prospects that are about to find their way onto the Major League stage and are about to just take over? I have 10 teams that have had majority losing recent history, and I'm going to rank those 10 teams to detail which ones I believe are most suited to follow into the footsteps or in the footsteps of the Baltimore Orioles. Which team is most suited to turn a corner next? That's coming up. But first, my favorite stat of the week. Big blockbuster trade, which is rare in May, but we saw it between the Miami Marlins and San Diego Padres this last Friday night. San Diego Padres sent over 3 prospects to Miami in exchange for two-time batting champ Luis Arraez. And the best part about this is not just what it's going to do on the field for the Padres, and not just what it's doing currently when it comes to stats and whatnot. The coolest thing about Luis Arraez going to San Diego is that he's going to the house that Tony Gwynn built. There's no one in the history of baseball, and there might not be another Tony Gwynn for the rest of eternity of baseball. We might not see another Tony Gwynn. We don't see guys with strikeout percentages, career strikeout percentages of 4%, which is exactly what Tony Gwynn was. But Luis Arraez, if anybody's close, especially in today's age, if anybody is close to Tony Gwynn, it would be Luis Arraez. So he might not be Tony Gwynn, but the closest thing to Tony Gwynn in today's age is Luis Arraez. And now he's going to San Diego, the house that Tony Gwynn built, Mr. Padre. I went to college in San Diego. There's a freeway named after him. There's a statue in San Diego of Tony Gwynn. He went and coached once he was done playing as a Padre. He went and coached as the head coach at San Diego State University. There's a lot of love, respect. He's an icon. Tony Gwynn Jr. is still doing broadcasting, and he's a radio host down there in San Diego. The Gwynn family means so much to that San Diego community. And now for the so-called, what many consider the modern day Tony Gwynn, or at least closest thing to Luis Arraez, now going to San Diego, the house that the house that Tony Gwynn built. Couldn't be a better fit. And to give you an idea of just how close these two players are, first 5 seasons, this is really, really strange, guys. Really, really weird. First 5 seasons, MLB seasons for Luis Arraez and Tony Gwynn, both equal batting averages, 326. Both Tony Gwynn and Luis Arraez had a 326 batting average through their first 5 MLB seasons. Both Tony Gwynn and Luis Arraez had exactly a 427 slugging percentage through their first 5 seasons. OPS, Luis Arraez, 806, Tony Gwynn, 804. That's how close and how much these two resemble each other. High contact, they don't strike out a lot. Really that old traditional baseball style that is, for the most part, left, and they're completely been removed from today's game. Now Luis Arraez, same batting average as Tony Gwynn through the first 5 MLB seasons. Now he's headed to San Diego. Should be an interesting fit. San Diego hasn't lacked scoring runs this year. It's been mostly a challenge of limiting runs from a pitching standpoint. But now Tatis, Machado, Cronenworth, these guys that are going to be hitting behind Arraez could lead to some more run scoring opportunities with Arraez getting on base for him. So very cool stat of the week. Same batting average, Arraez, Gwynn through their first 5 MLB seasons. Best story of the week before we get to teams most suited to follow in the footsteps of the Orioles. My favorite story of the week comes from St. Louis. Kid named Chris Roycroft, who made his Major League Baseball debut on Tuesday evening. Roycroft played baseball and basketball at Division III Aurora University in Illinois. Roycroft worked a number of different jobs throughout college, including he was a delivery driver at Jimmy John's, the sandwich food restaurant. He was a customer service specialist at Dick's Sporting Goods. And he also worked just as a shop employee at a local auto shop. And if you look at his LinkedIn page, which is the coolest thing ever, if you just go on to LinkedIn.com, you type in Chris Roycroft, his LinkedIn page literally goes Jimmy John's, Dick's, in order, by the way, Jimmy John's, Dick's Sporting Goods, shop employee, professional baseball player for the Joliet Slammers, which is an indie ball organization. He played there for 2 seasons. And then right above that, it's professional baseball player, St. Louis Cardinals. So within a 1.5 year span, according to his LinkedIn page, he went from local auto shop employee, which his responsibilities included working heavy machinery such as forklifts and car lifts. And then a 1.5 years later, he bumps up to professional baseball player. And Roycroft made his Major League Baseball debut on Tuesday. I love seeing these types of stories. I mean, we're all living our normal lives, and sometimes when you look at these players on screen, you don't even think they're human. And so these types of stories really humanizes the game of baseball. Roycroft was working in an auto body shop 1.5 years ago. Here he is pitching at the big league stage. And he sports a 97+ mile an hour fastball, has some really good stuff. So best of luck to Roycroft, and hopefully he can stay at the big league level for some time longer. All right, meat and potatoes time, baby. Meat and potatoes. Franchises that are most suited to follow in the footsteps of the Baltimore Orioles. Who's next? Now, I'm not trying to scratch my own back here. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I will say I was on top of the Chicago White Sox and San Diego Padres in their turnaround. I called it back in 2019. I saw their farm system. I saw the guys that they had already foundation-wise. I saw how their front office, both those front offices, operated or were operating at the time. And I knew that both those franchises were going to turn a corner. Sure enough, the Padres, after they brought up Fernando Tatis Jr., now they're playoff contender, and they made the National League Championship Series just 2 seasons ago, and they were able to turn that franchise around. Chicago White Sox, they made the playoffs in back-to-back seasons, 2020, 2021. That was after being a recently historically bad franchise. I called the Miami Marlins just a season ago. I said that they were going to make the playoffs, and I had a lot of confidence in their ability to pitch. They were able to make the playoffs in 2023. And then now here in 2024, again, the wheels have fallen off a little bit for Pittsburgh, but it's still very, very early. They're still hovering around 500. It's a very winnable National League Central. Brewers and Cubs are obviously your top dog teams, but I still think Pittsburgh could give them a run for their money. as long as Paul Skeens comes up and is the Paul Skeens that we all hope he is, which all indications are that he is. Again, I'm not tooting my own horn here, but I think I have some sort of knack for being able to identify these teams at an early stage and saying, hey, this team has the ability to really become something in future years. I kind of did a similar thing with Seattle as well before Julio Rodriguez was brought up. So I say that, at a risk of sounding arrogant, I say that with as much humility as I can. Keep this in mind. I did not include teams that have recently won and had a lot of success. So, for example, I did not include the San Francisco Giants, Boston Red Sox, St. Louis Cardinals, New York Mets, Chicago Cubs, or the Cleveland Guardians on this list. I had 10 teams. 10 teams that in recent years, and by recent, I mean this last decade, have really had a struggle. Like the playoffs have been an uphill climb. A championship, it really nowhere even close. Those teams I just mentioned, Giants won 3 titles in the 2010s. The Red Sox won a couple titles. Cardinals, they won a title, what was it, 2011, I think it was, which I get it. It's been some time since then. But St. Louis Cardinals really been a historically winning franchise. New York Mets, they had a winning season just 2 seasons ago. Chicago Cubs, they had a winning season last year, 2023, and then now they're in first place here in 2024. And the Cleveland Guardians, I could have thrown them into this list of 10 of just because they don't have a high payroll. They're constantly like a revolving door of players because they don't really extend players. They got rid of Lindor. They probably going to get rid of Shane Bieber at the end of this season because he's going to be a free agent. So I could have included Cleveland on this list. I chose not to, just simply because they're in first place now. They've been in a World Series in the last decade. They've had a lot of playoff success recently, so I left Cleveland out as well. So 10 teams that I believe are in trajectory of following or could have potential to follow. Those include the Angels, Rockies, Tigers, Pirates, Nationals, Reds, A's, Marlins, White Sox. So those 10 teams, I'm going to rank those teams to indicate who I think is next up in Major League Baseball. Who is the next team to beat? And I also give my projected playoff. When will each of those 10 teams, when will they make the playoffs next? I'll give my guesstimate. All right, let's start off. I will work bottom to top from team I least think will follow in the footsteps of the Baltimore Orioles, and that's my number 10 team, which is the Chicago White Sox. Chicago, it's less about farm system for them, and they don't have a great one. They have the number 20th ranked farm system according to MajorLeagueBaseball.com coming into the 2024 season. They have 2 top 100 prospects as well, but it's less about what they have, and it's more about what that front office is about. Front office, the biggest contract that they've ever handed out was to Andrew Benintendi just a couple seasons ago. They have not handed out a contract that has exceeded $70 million in its franchise's history. That was Benintendi. So you have to have some type of aggression. White Sox don't have that. They have no real direction right now, especially when you consider that their core that they have between Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, like those guys, they're not in the same timeline as their next, supposed hopeful playoff run would be. Luis Robert could be traded. Dylan Cease just got traded 2 months ago to San Diego. Michael Kopech likely going to get traded. So this round of prospects that we just saw come through, Andrew Vaughn, a lot of those guys are probably going to be gone by the time their next playoff round comes through. I have the projected playoff year for the Chicago White Sox as 2028. But yeah, Chicago White Sox are among my 10 teams the least likely to follow in the footsteps of the Baltimore Orioles. Number 9, I have the Miami Marlins. Now, I did include Miami on this list, and I could get some flack for it, which is totally deserved. Miami they were in the playoffs a season ago, 2023. So if people are mad at me for including Miami on this list because they have had some recent success, I get it. But last year, not including that 2020 COVID year, last year was the Miami Marlins' first playoff appearance in like a decade and a half. This is a franchise that doesn't have a high payroll. They are constantly fighting that uphill battle of trying to battle with teams like the Mets, Phillies, and Braves So I put Miami on this list. If you disagree with that, that's fine. I understand it. I have them number 9 on my list. Very unlikely to follow in the footsteps of the Baltimore Orioles at this juncture, simply because they have the number 29th ranked farm system in Major League Baseball coming into the season. They have one top 100 prospect, Noble Meyer. He's the number 57 prospect. You look at their prospect list. Unfortunately, a lot of them have been injured. Max Meyer, he's been injured. Jesus Luzardo, he's going strong now, but he had some elbow issues early on in the season. Unfortunately, Yuri Perez, who's going to be an absolute star in this league, he's done for the season because he underwent Tommy John surgery. Sandy Alcantara, he's out for the year with Tommy John surgery. So Miami, and if anybody watched the Wake and Rake podcast, I don't think anybody was higher on the Miami Marlins, those fighting fish, than I was last year. I was kind of on top of it for the most part when it came to their projection. I really thought they were going to be a playoff team, and sure enough, they were a season ago just because of their pitching and their bullpen. They struggled scoring runs, but their pitching is they're young, but they're going to be legit. Problem is now they're injured. They don't have a great farm system right now. Don't love what Peter Bendix front office. I don't love what they've done when it comes to feel and direction. You get rid of Kim Ng, and Kim Ng was able to kind of turn around that franchise very, very quickly, built a playoff roster. And then Jeter left, Ng left. You bring in Peter Bendix, who's from the Tampa Bay Rays, very high on analytics and doesn't really see players for players. He really looks at it through that analytical lens. And in my opinion, he doesn't see a balance. Don't love what I'm seeing from Miami right now, especially when you consider the injuries. My next projected playoff year for the Miami Marlins, when you consider how tough that National League East is also 2028. Number 8, Los Angeles Angels. They have the 30th ranked farm system in Major League Baseball. That's good for last in Major League Baseball. They have one top 100 prospect coming into the season. That's Nolan Schanuel. Their ownership, too, has indicated that Artie Moreno could very well sell the team. They've kind of pulled that back in and taken that idea off the table. But for the last year and a half, especially when Ohtani was approaching free agency, there were reports and there were confirmation of the reports that Artie Moreno was looking to sell the team. Now he's looking to hold on to the team, but the Angels for years have this reputation. I've spoken with different sources and even minor league players about this. They have one of the worst environments and cultures at the minor league ranks, and that's indicative of their farm system ranking last in baseball. The only way that you're going to be able to turn around a franchise is by doing it both through payroll, buying players, getting free agents, and also through the system. You look at the Dodgers just up north, the I-5 from the Angels. Yeah, the Dodgers spend a lot of money, but look at the guys that they were able to get through the system. Guys like Gavin Lux and their entire pitching staff, guys like Bobby Miller. It's got to be a balance. You can't just buy an entire roster. Look at what the Mets and what happened to them in 2023. Look at what the Padres did last year in 2023. Didn't work, in the Yankees as well. So it's got to be a balance. You got to have some substance from your farm system. And then you can use that farm system to maybe trade for guys like Tyler Glasnow, like what the Dodgers did. But you got to have some farm system under your belt. The Angels are my 8th likely team to follow in the footsteps. Number 7, Colorado Rockies. And this as much has to do with just how tough that National League West division is. And I have no idea what the Rockies are doing when it comes to just direction. I mean, you trade Nolan Arenado a few seasons ago, and then you sign Chris Bryant the offseason immediately after trading Nolan Arenado. And if you want to make the case that Arenado was not part of your future, that's fine, which I don't understand because relatively speaking, he could have been decently affordable for the duration of that extension that you signed him to just a couple seasons prior. If you want to make the case that he wasn't part of your future, that's fine. But why do you go and sign Chris Bryant, who has dealt with injuries for the past 2 seasons, and really one of the worst contracts in baseball, just statistically speaking, since signing with Colorado? And he can't even play the third base position anymore because of the injuries that he suffered. They've moved him over to first base. It's been a real disaster in Colorado. farm system right now, it's looking better than it has in recent years. They have 4 top 100 prospects. Adael Amador, who's at the AA level, his projection is 2025. He's number 24 prospect in all of baseball. Chase Dollander, number 46 overall prospect in baseball. Yanquiel Fernandez, number 64. And they just brought up Jordan Beck to the big leagues this past week. Jordan Beck, formerly from Tennessee, got a little. I like the way he plays, man. He's got that edge. He's got that little chip on his shoulder. So the farm system's looking better and better. They also have Sterling Thompson, who was recently brought into the top 100, not at the beginning of the season, but during the season because they had some mixing around. So Sterling Thompson, also a top 100 player, according to MLB.com. So right coming into the season, they had 4 top 100. Now the Rockies have 5 top 100 prospects. So this, if it wasn't for the division, and if it wasn't for just the lack of direction when it comes to the Colorado Rockies franchise and that front office, I'd probably have Colorado higher. But until I see this team have any sort of direction, I have them as the 7th likeliest team to follow in the footsteps of the Orioles. My projected playoff year for the Rockies is 2027. For the Angels, I don't know if I mentioned that. I have them as making the playoffs in 2028. Of course, the Angels have the longest playoff drought in Major League Baseball now. And the Rockies are not far behind them. The Oakland A's are my 6th likeliest team to follow in the footsteps of the Baltimore Orioles. Now, you look at the Oakland A's franchise, it's really a cycle for them. Typically what happens is because of that front office, which I could go back on previous episodes, you know exactly my thoughts on Billy Beane, that front office, that ownership group. I won't get too off topic here. But you look at franchise's history since that ownership group took over. Typically what you have is you have a couple losing seasons, then you have about a 3-4 year stretch of winning seasons, and you see some progression. And then those guys that helped you make the playoffs now are free agents, and the ownership group refuses to pay those guys. And so they ship them off. They get some prospects in return. Then you have 3-4 more years of a rebuild, then 4 more years of those prospects that they got in return. Now they're at the big league level. So it's a cycle. It's just a cycle in Oakland. Look at their history since making the after making the ALCS in 2006. They missed the next 5 seasons. They missed the playoffs in 5 straight seasons. Then they made the playoffs 3 straight seasons: 2012, 2013, 2014. Then they missed the playoffs the next 3 seasons: 2015, 2016, 2017. Then they made the playoffs 3 straight seasons: 2018, 2019, and 2020. So it's just a cycle. They make the playoffs a few seasons, and they'll miss. It comes in bunches on both. It's the extreme. It's extremely bad or extremely good because of the way that they handle their roster and the way that they use, or lack thereof, money to build a roster. So they last made the playoffs in 2020. Now they've since missed the playoffs 3 straight seasons. They're 17-20 this year after going 50-112 last year. So they're playing more competitive baseball now. And some of those prospects that they got in return, such as Esteury Ruiz, they're now coming up to the big league level, and they're starting to turn that corner a little bit. Now, I probably would have Oakland a little bit higher up on my list here if it wasn't for the relocation purposes. I think that's going to have, they're going to be playing at a AAA ballpark next season in Sacramento. This roster is showing some definite growth, but when it comes to relocation, being able to, get guys in free agency and being able to build a roster, I think it's going to be really tough. So just because of the relocation, everything that's going on, they had the number 25 farm system in baseball. A couple of the guys that they got in return for those trades, and the Matt Olson trade, Sean Murphy trades, Shea Langoliers is finally starting to come along. He shows a lot of pop, but there's a lot of guys that maybe haven't, Ken Waldichuk, guys that haven't really provided much in return yet. So I have them 6th on the list. My projected playoff date for the Oakland A's is 2026. Number 5. Could get some pushback on this one simply because of how well they're doing here in 2024, and that is the Kansas City Royals. The reason I have them so low on my list is because they have the number 28 farm system in baseball, and they have just 1 top 100 prospect. Now, you look at the MLB standings right now, and Kansas City Royals are 21-16. So, and by the way, talk about prospects. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. came up season and a half ago, 2 seasons ago, and Bobby Witt Jr. has a chance to really become one of the faces of baseball. But again, when it comes to payroll, I mentioned this when I talked about, the Angels. You can't just only buy a roster and you can't just only build a roster. It's got to be a balance. Now, Kansas City right now, they don't have high payroll. They're considered one of your so-called small market teams. You have a good core, Cole Reagans, Bobby Witt Jr., Michael Garcia. You do have a good foundation, which is why I think, they'll continue to be a competitive ball club here in 2024. Really fun team. But in regards to becoming the next Baltimore Orioles, I don't think they have enough star power. Like, I see Adley Rutschman in Bobby Witt Jr., star power wise. After Adley Rutschman, after Bobby Witt Jr., who's it going to be in Kansas City? I really like Michael Garcia as a player. Do I think he's going to be an absolute superstar? That remains to be seen. I like Pasquantino, Salvador Perez. He's getting older and older, still really hitting the ball. I mean, he's been probably the best hitting catcher in baseball so far. So I still like Salvi. But does he work with the timeline? That remains to be seen. So I like Kansas City. I think that they will be a competitive ball club, but because of the lack of farm system, one top 100 prospect, I think that's why they're so down on my list at number 5. My projected playoff year for the Royals, though, is 2025. So I do think they'll probably just miss the playoffs, likely because of the teams that I'm coming up on this list. I'm about to mention a couple of them. But I do think 2025, Bobby Witt Jr. hitting his stride, probably a good timeline for them. I just alluded and foreshadowed this one. Number 4 on my list of most likely to follow in the footsteps of the Baltimore Orioles is the Detroit Tigers. They have the number 5 farm system in baseball. The reason I have them above the Kansas City Royals is because of their farm system and because of their trajectory, the guys that they have coming up through their system. You look at top 100 prospects for the Detroit Tigers, and that's not mentioning the guys that they already have right now with guys like Tarek Skubal, Casey Mize, not Adley Rutschman, Spencer Torkelson, Riley Green, who are currently at the big league level. All those guys are former top 100 prospects. Detroit Tigers also had the number 11 prospect in baseball in Max Clark. He's in single A right now. They have Colt Keith currently at the big league level. They just brought him up. Just 22 years old. He's the number 19 prospect in baseball. Jackson Jobe at the AA level, number 21 prospect in baseball. And Jace Young at the AAA level, he's the number 53 prospect in baseball. So they have 4 players in the top 53 prospects, and 2 of them are on the cusp or at the big league level. A couple of them single A, double A. You look at their roster too, their current roster, they're still very, very young. I mentioned Torkelson. I mentioned Riley Green. Riley Green is killing the ball right now. Dealt with some injuries his rookie season, and I think it really stunted his growth. But now Riley Green is healthy and is playing like an all-star player at the leadoff position. And Detroit's winning games too. Let's see where they are in the division. Detroit is 19-17, so very much, kind of in that Kansas City Royals side. They're 4th in the American League Central, but American League Central this year, surprisingly, has been really, really good. So 19-17, they're 4 games back. Kerry Carpenter was another guy that came up last year and really showed a lot of growth. Torkelson has really lost a lot of his pop that he showed in the 2023 season, but hoping he catches fire at some point. But starting pitching wise too, that's another reason why I have the Tigers so high up on my list, and maybe I should have them higher. Maybe putting them 4th on my list is disrespect. But Tarek Skubal very well could win the American League Cy Young this year. He's still just 27 years old. Casey Mize, 27 years old, former number 2 overall pick out of Auburn. They have some absolute dudes to look forward to in Detroit, and they finally got that contract of Miguel Cabrera off their books. It reminds me a little bit, because we're comparing these teams to Baltimore and their resurrection of their franchise. It reminds me a little bit of that Chris Davis contract that Baltimore that front office what Mike Elias inherited when he came over and took over that front office in Baltimore. Well, Detroit, they had that contract of Miguel Cabrera, and they gave him the red carpet treatment, sent him into the sunset, riding off into the sunset last year. He got his 3,000th hit, 500 home runs, et cetera, et cetera. Very much deserved. But objectively, that Miguel Cabrera contract really handcuffed that team for years. Very similar to how the Baltimore Orioles had to deal with the Chris Davis contract. So it's very similar. Older first baseman, no longer producing, getting paid a whole lot of money. 50% of their payroll, which is what the Orioles had with Davis, Miguel Cabrera, Tigers. Now you're having these prospects coming up. You have Miguel Cabrera's contract off the books. Now it's looking likelier and likelier that the Detroit Tigers, their time for turning the corner is now. My projected playoffs for the Detroit Tigers is 2024 this season. I do think they're going to be in the thick of it just because they really haven't hit the ball well. Their pitching is keeping them in ball games here this season. I do expect guys like Torkelson to start, showing a little bit more maturity at the plate and start getting back to what he was in 2023. So I do have projected playoffs for the Tigers 2024. Number 3, Pittsburgh Pirates. Yes. If anybody's listened to the Wake and Rake podcast before, they know how high I was and how much optimism I had for this Pittsburgh Pirates franchise coming into the 2024 season. A lot of people laughed at me. I had them winning the National League Central at the beginning of this season. People ridiculed me, and that's fine. I'll take it. I'll wear it. And all of a sudden, the first couple weeks of the season, the Pittsburgh Pirates had the best record in baseball. And people were saying, whoa, maybe Danny wasn't so crazy after all. Well, since then, the Pittsburgh Pirates have really fallen flat, and the wheels have fallen off a little bit, and they've had one of the worst records in baseball over the last 2 weeks of the season. So it's been a can of worms, if you will, or it's been extremely bad or extremely good for Pittsburgh this season. It still remains to be seen what this Pittsburgh Pirates team is going to be here in 2024. But I can say this. Coming into the season, they had the 9th best farm system in baseball, according to MLB.com, and they have 5 top 100 prospects, not including the guys already at the big league stage for them, guys like O'Neal Cruz. Let's see who they got in their top 100. Paul Skeens, which the only reason he's in AAA right now is because they're trying to build up his stamina. They're trying to build up his endurance at the starting pitching level. They started him off the first couple outings. He pitched 2 innings, 4 innings. He's only given up, I think it's 2 earned runs all season long. His strikeout per 9 at the AAA level, 18, which is ridiculous. A lot of people last year when Skeens was pitching for LSU in college and in the World Series were saying Skeens is one of a handful of guys that could come up to the big league level and play immediately. Well, now it's been almost a year and we're still not seeing Skeens at the big league level. I personally think that more has to do with limiting pitch counts. They're doing the same thing with Jared Jones right now too. Jared Jones is not pitching past 90, 95 pitches. Jared Jones, a number 55 prospect coming into the season. He is at the big league stage and he's been flourishing all season long. So Pittsburgh's being very, very tight and safe when it comes to their starting pitchers. So Skeens is going to be at the big league level very, very soon. He is the number 3 prospect in Major League Baseball. Tamar Johnson, this guy kind of came out of nowhere. He's only 19 years old. He's at the single A level, but he came up to spring training this year with the Pirates and really caught some eyes. Johnson batted .348 in spring training this year. He had a couple home runs, 1052 OPS in his first big league spring training. A second baseman, which you don't typically expect to provide much pop, but Tamar Johnson does have some pop in his bat. He's just 19 years old, and he's still at the single A level. So it still remains to be seen what he's going to become. But he's a number 39 prospect in baseball. I already mentioned Jared Jones. Let's talk about Jared Jones for a second this year and just kind of highlight his stats. Jared Jones is still just 22 years old. Former second-round draft pick out of La Mirada High School in California. And in his first stint at the big league level, Jared Jones this season, 2-3 with a 2.63 earned run average, 52 strikeouts in 41 innings pitched. That's an 11.4 strikeout per 9. Guys aren't getting hits off him. They can't hit the slider coming out of his hand. He's been one of by inning pitchers in baseball this season. I say by inning because, like I said, 7 starts, just 41 innings pitched. They're not, let's see, the most pitches he's thrown this year is 96. So they're building up stamina. That was just a few days ago on May 4th. So his first start of the year, looks like he pitched 80 pitches. Start after that was 85. He pitched just 59 pitches against New York. So they're not stretching Jared Jones at all, but just a little props to Jared Jones. And at first, he's probably leading, or at least they're up there at the tops with Rookie of the Year rankings so far. Again, let's get back on track. Kind of went on a Pittsburgh Pirates tangent then. 5 top 100 prospects. You also have a foundation of O'Neal Cruz, Mitch Keller, Brian Reynolds. And then I had their projected playoffs. I'm going to go down with my ship. I had them winning the National League Central at the beginning of this season. I'm going to say that their projected playoff year is 2024 for Pittsburgh. I think they're going to be in it. I believe in Ben Cherington and that front office. Ben Cherington was part of the front office that was able to win a World Series with the Boston Red Sox in 2013. This is a very, very interesting ball club, the one that I'm about to mention, because they're getting a lot of noise now. They're above 500 for the first time since 2021. They won the World Series in 2019, but that roster in 2019 looked a whole lot different than it does now. The Washington Nationals. Steven Strasburg contract. They let go of Anthony Rendon after they won the World Series. They traded Juan Soto away. And now, all of a sudden, the Washington Nationals, in the National League East of all divisions, with a division with the Braves and the Phillies, the Washington Nationals are 18-17 and in 3rd place in the National League East. C.J. Abrams is looking like an absolute star. He's batting .275 with an .888 OPS so far this season. 7 home runs, 8 stolen bases. And Abrams last year at just 22 years old, he was able to have an 18 home run, 47 stolen base season. Again, still 23 years old, C.J. Abrams. Jesse Winker's hitting the cover off the ball. He's not exactly going to be in the plans to stick around. I don't think a lot of people expected Jesse Winker to be leading the charge, but he's had a really good comeback season here in 24. More notably is their starting pitching. Guys like Mackenzie Gore, Trevor Williams, Jake Irvin. Those guys have been showing, keeping them in ball games. So when you look at the Baltimore Orioles and what they were able to start in their resurrection, yes, it was Adley Rutschman. Yes, it was Gunnar Henderson and those guys. But let's not forget that they had guys like Kyle Bradish around. They had guys like Dean Kramer, young starters who continued to develop and gave them opportunities to win ball games because they were keeping them in ball games. You got to have some starting pitchers that are going to give you a chance. Well, the Washington Nationals, now with Mackenzie Gore, he's 2-3 this year with a 3.44 earned run average, 42 strikeouts, and 34 innings pitched. He's the former number 2 prospect in all of baseball, Mackenzie Gore. Now he's starting to find his way. Last year, he had a really good first half of the season. Second half, not so much. He finished the year 7-10 with a 4.42 earned run average, Mackenzie Gore did. His first season with San Diego, before getting included in that Juan Soto trade, he was 4-4 with a 4.5 ERA. So 2022, 4.5 ERA. Next season, 4.42. Now here in 2024, a 3.44 earned run average. And his strikeout per 9 has gone up each of those seasons. 9.3, 10, 11.1. So Mackenzie Gore, now, he's still young. He's 25 years old. He just turned 25 2 months ago. So Mackenzie Gore certainly is going to be in the future plans for the Washington Nationals. They have 3 top 100 prospects, the Washington Nationals do. That's not including C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore. Dylan Cruz, he's the number 6 prospect in all of baseball. He's currently at the AA level at just 22 years old. James Wood had arguably the best spring training of any player here in 2024. He hit the cover off the ball. James Wood at just 21 years old. He's the number 12 prospect in baseball. Brady House, number 43 prospect in baseball, and Yohandy Morales, number 97 prospect in baseball. I didn't even mention Cade Cavalli, by the way. Cade Cavalli, a lot of people forget. Cade Cavalli was like the Spencer Strider before Spencer Strider. Cade Cavalli is a guy that he came up, he pitched in the futures game and it caught a lot of eyes and attention. Cavalli is a guy, a starting pitcher who's their former top prospect, former first-round draft pick, taken 22nd overall in the 2020 draft at the University of Oklahoma. And Cavalli, he a very, very short stint. He pitched one game in 2022. That was his Major League Baseball debut. He pitched 4 1/3, and he gave up 7 earned. So not great. But I say this is the guy that was like Spencer Strider before Spencer Strider, kind of, because he came up in 2022, former top prospect. Then the injuries started mounting, ended up having Tommy John. Now Cavalli is expected to come back here in the 2024 season. He hasn't made his debut or his 24 season debut yet, but they're expecting him back later this year. Cavalli, it's anything but certain what guys are after, post Tommy John surgery. But if Cavalli is anything like what he was projected to be before that Tommy John surgery, you're going to get a Spencer Strider-esque average 98 plus mile an hour fastball from a starting pitcher. A lot of people talk about Spencer Strider as if it's facing a closer for 6 straight consecutive innings. That's the same thing with Cade Cavalli. So you have a starting rotation of Mackenzie Gore and Cade Cavalli. If Cade Cavalli can be that guy, Washington Nationals definitely have a future. Let's take a look at the Juan Soto trade. And this is going to be hindsight bias. Some people critiqued the Nationals at the time for trading away Soto, but the reality is that all indications were that the Nationals offered Juan Soto an extension that exceeded $400 million. And Soto rejected that offer, and he's kind of reiterated the same notions in his press conferences, even now with the Yankees and even when he was with the Padres, is that he intends to hit free agency. He wants to test the market. Well, he rejected that $400+ million extension from the Nationals. And so the Nationals said, all right, we've got to get what we can get for Soto. If we're going to lose him, we're not going to be winning games before he hits free agency. We're going to have to trade Soto. And they found a trade partner with the San Diego Padres back in 2022. Padres, they received Juan Soto and first baseman Josh Bell. The Washington Nationals received Luke Voit, C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, Robert Hassel, James Wood, and Harlan Susana. So Voit, he's gone. That was never part of the future. He was kind of a piece of the puzzle when it came to monetary exchange. C.J. Abrams, he just enjoyed himself, as I already mentioned. 18 home runs last season, 47 stolen bases, looking like he could become an absolute star. Mackenzie Gore, I just mentioned, his ERA has lowered each of his 3 MLB seasons. His strikeout per 9 has increased each of his first 3 MLB seasons, and he looks healthy, and he's still just 25 years old. Robert Hassel, he's no longer considered a top 100 prospect. He hasn't quite had the same success at the AA level as he did at the lower stages. But still just 22 years old. Still kind of remains to be seen what he's going to develop into. James Wood is probably going to be getting his call up to the big leagues very, very soon. He's hitting .339 at the AAA level. He's got 4 home runs this year, 14 ribbies, and 8 stolen bases. James Wood is just 21 years old. When they acquired him 2 years ago, the Nationals, James Wood, a lot of people were high on this kid. He's large. He's 6'7", 234 pounds. And so a lot of scouts, they loved the projection. They loved what this kid could become. Very O'Neal Cruz-esque from the left side, 6'7". And so they loved James Wood, and the Nationals did too, which is why they were able to lure him from the Padres in that Juan Soto trade. And James Wood's killing the ball. Like I said, he had a monster spring training this year. He played 22 games. He batted .364, 4 home runs, hit a 12-14 OPS. James Wood did this 2024 spring training. So yeah, James Wood, add him to the list. He's going to be coming up. You're going to be seeing him very, very soon. Now, I mentioned the division, which is why I don't have the Nationals making the playoffs this season. You still have the Braves. You still have the Phillies. National League is just a gauntlet this year. But I have the projected playoffs for the Washington Nationals as 2025. You could certainly make the case that I should have them number 1 because I mentioned how close they are, both literally speaking and metaphorically, to Baltimore. They're right down the road from Baltimore, Maryland. The Nationals had 3 top 100, number 12 farm system. They have a foundation already in Gore and Abrams. If Abrams is Adley Rutschman, Gore could be their Grayson Rodriguez. You just continue to build from there. So Washington Nationals, I think, are the second likeliest team to follow in the footsteps of the Baltimore Orioles. They could be next. And finally, the number one team that I think is most likely to follow in the footsteps of the Baltimore Orioles and resurrect their franchise is the Cincinnati Reds. Cincinnati Reds have the number 10 ranked farm system coming into 2024. They have 5 top 100 prospects. I think some of the growth of some of their young players and just wins in general, they're 16 and 18 this year. I think it's been stunted because their former number 1 overall prospect, Noelvi Marte, he's suspended for the first 50 games of the season for PEDs. He was acquired for Luis Castillo from Seattle 2 seasons ago or 2 trade deadlines ago. And then also Matt McLain is likely out for the season. McLain was in the Rookie of the Year race last year with Cincinnati. Cincinnati had their first winning season since 2020. And unfortunately, with Matt McLain out for the season, or looking like he's out for the season, and in Noelvi Marte being suspended for the first 50 games, I think it stunted this team's growth, which is why they're not having as good of a start this season as maybe they did last season. So we look at the Reds, not even including the players that are already on their current roster. They have 5 top 100 prospects, including Noelvi Marte, who I mentioned, Rhett Lauder and Single A. He's the number 30 prospect in baseball. Edwin Arroyo, another shortstop, number 59 prospect in baseball. Connor Phillips is at the AAA level. He's a number 62 prospect in baseball. Likely going to see him at some point this season. And then Chase Petty, the number 87 prospect in Major League Baseball. I compared the Detroit Tigers and their contract situation with Miguel Cabrera. I compared that to Chris Davis and the Orioles. Cincinnati Reds, very similarly, left-handed hitting first baseman, face of the franchise, made the playoffs with this guy. Joey Votto is who I'm referring to, but massive contract. And again, amazing player, amazing years in Cincinnati, potential Hall of Fame player, but objectively handcuffed the franchise monetarily because you have a front office that's not spending a whole lot of dough. So Joey Votto's 240 million, I forget what it was exactly, contract definitely handcuffed the franchise for years and their ability to field a complete team. Well, now Votto's contract is off the books, and now they can look toward the future. They made the trades of Luis Castillo to get guys like Noelvi Marte. So now you look at their roster now you're seeing the players that the rebuild is starting to building, if you will. Those guys that I mentioned, top prospects, top 100 prospect, that doesn't include the players already on their roster either. Elly De La Cruz was the number 10 prospect in baseball a season ago. Hunter Green, who is now their ace, he was the former number 22 ranked prospect in all of baseball 2 seasons ago. Nick Lodolo, before he endured some injuries, he was a number 42 ranked prospect in all of baseball. Matt McLain, who I did mention, he's a former top 100 prospect as well. Marte has been in the rankings for years. And say what you want about PEDs and the impact on the game. Noelvi Marte, when he comes back from his suspension, is going to be a good player. Whether you support him or not because of his choices that he made on and off the field, that's your prerogative. But Noelvi Marte is going to be a good baseball player, whether he took PEDs or not. Number 18th ranked prospect in all of baseball. Christian Encarnacion Strand, Jonathan India is still on that ball club. They still have, obviously, Elly De La Cruz. De La Cruz has kind of thrust himself into MVP consideration already this year. 899 OPS, 8 home runs, 19 stolen bases. And I say that he's in the MVP conversation less because of his batting average OPS, but you saw last year with Ronald Acuna Jr., a guy that 40-70, I think it was, 40-60, 40 home runs, 60 stolen bases. Well, Elly De La Cruz right now is projected, or on pace, I should say, to hit 30-plus home runs and steal 60-plus bags. It's very similar numbers to Ronald Acuna Jr. They still have Spencer Steer, Will Benson, and then starting pitching-wise, Hunter Green, as I mentioned, Graham Ashcraft, Abbott, Nick Lodolo, and they signed Frankie Montas this last offseason. Alexis Diaz was one of, if not the best closers in Major League Baseball a season ago. So Cincinnati Reds, 5 top 100 prospects. And then they've also got a little bit of a slow start here in 2024, but a lot of it was injuries, suspensions. I have their projected playoff year as 2025. I do believe the National League is just going to be very, very tough to overcome this year, especially because of the injuries that they've suffered in Cincinnati. So I think it's going to be one more year before Cincinnati finally makes the playoffs once again. It would just be their second playoff appearance in the last decade. They made the playoffs in 2020. And before that, the last time they made the playoffs was 2013. So I do believe the Cincinnati Reds, because of the pitching that they possess, Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and then the 5 top 100 prospects, and then also you have your superstar and face of the franchise in Elly De La Cruz. I believe the Cincinnati Reds are best suited and best on track to follow the Baltimore Orioles as being the next team, the next great team in Major League Baseball. So let me just run through my list one more time and when I think they're going to make the playoffs. Starting with number 1, Cincinnati Reds, 2025 playoffs. Washington Nationals, number 2, their projected playoffs, 2025. Pittsburgh Pirates, projected playoffs, 2024. Detroit Tigers, my projected playoff for them is 2024. Kansas City Royals, after that, my projected playoff year for them is 2025. The A's, right after them, projected playoff 2026. Projected playoff for the Colorado Rockies, after that, 2027. Los Angeles Angels, I project them to make the playoffs in 2028. Number 9, the Miami Marlins, I project them to make the playoffs in 2028. And the Chicago White Sox, similarly, projected playoff year is 2028. A lot of things can happen. Injuries happen, knock on wood. It'll be a wait-to-see type situation. But Cincinnati, Washington, those are my 2 teams. I think they're about to flourish. Appreciate you guys tuning into the Wake and Rake podcast. We will have another episode coming out later this week regarding expansion teams and which teams should move where, which teams, what Major League Baseball should do, and what city is most deserving of hosting the next Major League Baseball squad. Episode 117, all part of the Believe Network Wake and Rake podcast presented by Bet Online. Talk to you all soon, people. Peace.